welcome back to the channel. Today's painting takes a lot of inspiration from a lot of other paintings. Today's painting, just put my hand in some leaves. Today's painting is this. It is a sunset over the ocean. There are lots of different types of clouds with lots of different colors. It's fairly elaborate in the sky, which is why the base is so simple. It's kind of a balancing act. But the history behind this painting, it's kind of interesting. And we will get to the painting portion very soon. I don't know, I know I appreciate backstories to how paintings come to be, and maybe you do too. So, before I started my Patreon in the hour-long lesson series, I did this painting, and it was meant to be an hour-long lesson. I ended up not loving it to the extent I wanted to, and I wanted to redo it. But over the last year, I've noticed that I'm the only person who likes mountain paintings, at least that I've found on the channel, which is unfortunate because I love them, but that's okay. Now, also, in addition to that, there is this painting, which is kind of this sunset scene that's very serene, it's very calm, you see out into the ocean. And so I took those ideas because I knew I couldn't do another mountain, and I made this again. So this piece is really an amalgamation of lessons I've really loved. I hope that you really love it and that you love working on it. As per usual, if you'd like help with the drawing process, you can find the digital sketch up over on Patreon with the grid lines and all of that to help you transfer it. You can also find over 40 other hour-long lessons, including this one up over there. You get reference photos and all of that. It's also just a great way to help support myself and the channel. So thank you so much for stopping by. Let's get into the tutorial and have some fun. Today we're going to be painting a seascape, so I have this part mapped off so I can work on the top of the sky in more of a messy, free-flowing fashion. That way I get to really apply my paints liberally and not worry about working anything down here. I have just green frog tape, it's easy to come off, and it won't hurt the canvas. I don't have a drawing here because, again, I just want this to be much more of a free-flowing painting. That said, there will be a digital sketch, which I will do of it once it's done, if that's something that you are looking for. I'm going to begin here today by taking my larger square-headed brush, dipping the tip of it in some water, wiping off the excess. This is going to condense the bristles, that way I don't have any loose strands. It's also going to help me move my paint out a bit more on the canvas and extend its wet life. I'm going to grab some titanium white and some primary yellow. Then I'm going to blend those two together, just like so. I'm going to grab a hint of primary red, work that in, get a nice bright orangey yellow. And I'm going to apply this down at the bottom of our horizon. I'm going to blend it all the way across our canvas. I'm going to make this painting have some nice big clouds on it. So when we normally work on a sunset, we'd drag this pigment very far upwards and even to extend to the top, but that's not what we're going to do here. It's going to be a much more dramatic sunset. So our application of yellow is actually going to end right about here. We're not going to need any more than this. I'm going to grab a bit more of our primary red, apply that into our mixture, get a little bit more primary yellow, a little more primary red, create more of an orangey red. I'm going to apply this to the side and blend that in. Then we're going to go back, grab some primary yellow, some titanium white, make a really bright pigment, brighter than we've had before. I'm going to apply this in the middle, and then I'm going to blend it to the left and the right. This way the middle area where we're going to have our sun is going to be the brightest. It's going to have the most yellow in it. And then as we work towards the left and the right hand side, you get more of that beautiful orangey pink sunset pigment. Now I'm going to move on to the top of the canvas, and I'm actually going to do something very different. I'm going to grab a primary blue, going to grab a fair amount of Mars black, but an equal amount of titanium white. I'm going to mix up a desaturated darker blue, as you can see right here. I'm going to apply this to the top. Now, if we were going to blend these two pigments together here, they would turn into a green. And we don't want a green sky for our sunset here. We want it to be much more dramatic. We want a lot more color in it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to apply this blue to the top, as you can see. Blend it all the way from the left to the right hand side. Then I'm going to grab some more titanium white, brighten it up a little bit. Going to go right under it. And then I'm going to start blending that up as well. For the clouds, I'm going to be using my medium-sized round-headed brush because it doesn't have any sharp edges, and I can get some really smooth, nice transparent edges on the clouds. I'm going to make sure that it's nice and damp. I'm going to grab some primary blue, about double that of primary red because the primary blue is so strong it'll overwhelm it, and if you want a purple you need to do more of that ratio. Then I'm going to grab a hint of Mars Black and a good amount of titanium white, about double what I took of the Mars Black. Then once I have this nice purple, I'm going to test it in between the two. As you can see, it is a very saturated purple, and I don't want that. I want something much more subtle and subdued, so I'm going to take much more Mars Black, I'm going to take much more titanium white, and this is a much more natural color. So I'm going to begin by just blocking in the main area, and then when I get to an edge here, like you can see it touching, I'm going to wipe off all of the paint that I have on my brush. I'm going to make it nice and damp, and then in a circular stroke I'm going to blend it up into the rest of our sky. It's important that the cloud isn't just flat across the sky. It needs peaks and valleys, just like everything else. It'll make it much more interesting. And then I'll have it come up here and then again recede to about the bottom of our sky here. Now you can see that this side has a bit more cloud at the bottom. It's a bit larger. That's because I'm putting the sun over here, and I want this side of the painting to still be interesting. So once I get closer to the bottom, I'm going to start moving back and forth in those horizontal strokes rather than creating these larger clusters of clouds. Just like that. And another effect you can have is by making the bottom of the cloud fairly sharp and then blending up the top of the cloud, you can make it look like it has some real volume. I'm going to take my smaller round-headed brush because again it doesn't have any sharp edges, and I'll be able to get a really nice gradient around all of my applications, kind of fading off into nothing. I'm going to grab the lightest yellow that I have, add a little bit of extra titanium white into there, and then right around here I'm going to paint in my sun. I'm going to have it get lost behind one of these little clouds here, and then I'll work it out just like that. But I don't want it to look like just a little round circle, so I'm going to blend the edges with a very damp brush out fairly far, just like this, and kind of get rid of that definitive edge that it has. It'll look much more natural and interesting this way. Now we're going to add some of the beautiful reflective light from the sun, because it's going to illuminate parts of these purple clouds and make them look orange. Because if you remember, I've noted that generally in sunsets, purple clouds are actually very desaturated orange clouds. They don't have a lot of light, or they're too dense and the light can't work through them. So here we're going to add on the highlights of the orange from these clouds. So to do that, I'm going to take some primary yellow, I'm going to take some primary red. I'm using about double the primary yellow that I am red, because an equal mix will make more of a red, because red is much more of a dominant color. You need more yellow in the mixture to get an even orange. Then I'm going to grab some titanium white, mix up a nice orange here, and I'm going to layer this on the bottom of our previously applied purple clouds, very delicately. using the smaller round-headed brush because I want to work with real detail, but I also still want a bit of that feathered application. I don't want any super sharp edges. Really going to run it up this area. It's going to be the bottom of the cloud. It's going to be receiving a lot of this light. It's also going to add a lot of depth to the cloud as well. It's going to make it look much more three-dimensional. So we're going to the bottom of our purple applications, and then we're blending it out. You want it to be a fairly soft transition from the bottom stroke to the top area, going over a couple of these areas twice, just to make sure that they are nice and orange, nice and opaque, because again, we are working with a lot of primary yellow, which is a very thin pigment. I did lots of little details over here, so I'm spending the time making sure that I redo them yet again. Just applying that proper base. Connecting different sets of clouds as well. Now I'm also going to want other orange clouds up here. So I think we'll work on some directional clouds. When you're working on seascapes, which have fairly simple water in them, or any landscape really where you want the sky and the sunset to be the main focus, you should consider adding different types of clouds. So here we have this very large cloud right here. We have some that work kind of horizontally in the background, but let's create some interesting diagonal clouds as well that can lead the viewer's eye in towards the sunset. So here I'm going to start by mixing up a lot more of that orange, just like that. And now we're going to create some clouds that work in a line this way, that direct the eye from the corner of the painting down towards the sun. I'm going to be doing this with a tapping motion. Going to be connecting little taps and dots. Going to leave openings occasionally. I want the main shape to be a line, but it doesn't actually have to be a line. So I'm just trying to create as many different types of clouds as I can in this process. We have the horizontal ones, we have this larger one that kind of blocks the painting, and then we have these diagonal ones which come in larger clusters and then little tap and drag areas as well. I think we can still do a lot with these orange clouds, so I'm going to grab some extra primary yellow, some primary red, mix these two together as we have, titanium white. I think I'm going to expand this cloud. Make it much more dominant, a lot larger, and again, kind of take out that X shape I had there. There we go. I have a lot of paint on my brush right now, so I can make some more thick applications than I could before. Now, we couldn't have applied this initially because if we did, the yellow would be layering on tops of blues and purples, and it would have been turning into greens. But because we're applying it on top of oranges, we can actually see it as a yellow, which is exactly what we wanted. So it's important that you layer things with the darker orange first, and then you move into this yellow bright application. Now I do want to add a little bit of a highlight to our purple. So I'm going to grab some blue, about double that in red, grab some titanium white, make something a little bit brighter than what we had here, but I do need a little bit of Mars black because I still don't want it to be hyper saturated. There we go. Now it's more gray, but bright. And I can throw this into the tops of the clouds that might get a little bit of light on top. So there's this body area that's much darker, and it's dark because it's too dense, but the top area can be getting a little bit of light from this. Now I want to go back down into the bottom of the sky here and throw in some extra clouds just in the distance, in the background. To do that, I'm going to grab some primary red, some primary yellow, a little bit more primary yellow. There we are. Make a very thin, watery amounts. I'm just grabbing some extra water, working it in until it's almost like a watercolor consistency. And then I'll create some extra lines of clouds here in the background. We've cleaned our water, we've cleaned our brushes, and it's time for the fun part, which is peeling off the tape. Just like that. Exposing our incredibly detailed sky, giving us a new area to work. Now, before I work, I don't want to accidentally work my water up into the sky, so now I need to add a piece of green tape right here. And I'm going to do that now, but it's important that you wait until this is fully dry. If it's wet at all, you do risk harming the painting. Now we can begin working on the bottom of the water. And it's important to consider the color of water. Generally, I think a lot of us think of it as blue, but that's because it gets a blue reflection from the sky. What do we do when the sky looks like this if we don't want to do a mirror image? This is out on the ocean, the water's not going to be perfectly calm, so I'm not going to get a mirrored image because there's going to be too much movement in it. So instead, we're going to kind of combine all of these colors. So what happens when you take primary blue, primary red, yellow, you put them together. You get this purple that has a little bit more of an earth tone, occasionally a little bit of a green, but it's very dark. And it's important to note that the water is always darker than the sky. So we're going to begin here by taking this very dark pigment and lining the base of our water with it. And now I'm going to mix the top of it, which is going to be a reflection, much more so, of the brighter area. So I'm going to take some primary yellow, I'm going to take a lot of primary red, about even this time. I'm going to take a good amount of titanium white, because we will need to thicken this pigment quite a bit. And I'm going to apply this to the top. And I'm not holding the brush like this, I'm holding the brush like this now. That way we get to see movement in the water, get to see some stroke. There we go. And as you can see, the reflection of the water is more of a pinkish orangish red than it is a yellow. Now that we have the larger layers done here, we can remove the green tape. And we're going to do this so that we can match the colors that are right here to right here. I can switch back to my medium-sized square-headed brush, make sure it's nice and damp, head over to my palette, grab some primary yellow, about double that, maybe triple that in titanium white, as you can see right there. Going to head underneath the sun, and I'll start applying this. Now, I had too much paint on my brush to be careful with, so I just wiped that off, and now I'm going to work with the minimal amount that I have here on my brush right now. I'm going to blend it out from that area where the sun is touching. What you can also do to kind of connect the pinks in here to the rest of the painting is take some of those pinks, we still have them on our palette, and just work those up into the clouds as well. Make it nice and cohesive. Don't have to, but it can be a really nice effect. Hey there, it's Ryan O'Rourke. I truly hope you enjoyed today's little extra video. It was essentially a cut-up version of one of the many hour-long lessons which we offer over on patreon.com. Over there you'll also find digital sketches of the 10-minute painting lessons, digital sketches of these hour-long painting lessons, and a bunch of reference photos as well. So if any of that interests you, or if you just want to support the channel, go over there and check it out. It is a pleasure to make these long form videos, and I love to share them with all of you. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you next Saturday with a new video, and above all, as always, stay creative.